Why is it difficult to let go of an emotionally abusive partner? But before I really go there, let us examine what emotional abuse is. Emotional abuse is a common form of abuse that occurs in close relationships. It is also known as psychological abuse and includes verbal abuse. Emotional abuse is about one person maintaining power or control over another person. It usually takes place between intimate partners or comes from a parent to a child. It can also happen in situations such as schools or workplaces. For example, in the case of bullying. There are many different types of emotional abuse, including verbal attacks or threats, restricting a person's freedom, controlling or taking your money, food, or transportation, putting you down, insulting or humiliating you or blaming you, making you feel scared or threatened, making you isolated, deliberately doing things to hurt you, for example, bullying, or just being very jealous. Now, a lot of the things you would find in emotional abuse, you might also find in other areas of domestic violence or domestic abuse. So please take a look at my website. Click at articles on the top and go to my articles section. There's a example of a power and control wheel. So you can see how emotional abuse and other types of abuse like intimidation or isolation or economic abuse, male privilege, all of these can overlap in many ways. Okay, so that was the many different types of emotional abuse, and there are more, so check out my website. Okay, but for children, emotional abuse may include emotional neglect, that is not expressing love, not showing affection, or not playing with the child. Rejection or hostility towards the child. Insulting or humiliating comments made towards the child. Inappropriate parenting, such as having excessive expectations of the child or exposing them to domestic violence. Or not recognizing the child as a separate individual. For example, using the child to satisfy a parent's own needs or wishes above the needs and wishes of the child. Or isolating or confining the child, or failing to create opportunities for the child to learn, explore, or socialize with others. Emotional abuse can have serious negative effects on the physical and mental health of adults and children. If you or someone you know is experiencing emotional abuse, help is available. Keep listening to the end of the podcast for more information on where to get help. You can also visit my website. I have an article associated with this podcast. There are links down at the bottom. Okay. Not all emotionally abusive relationships are physically violent, but most physically violent relationships also include some form of emotional abuse. Emotional abuse is experienced both by men and women, but is more likely to be experienced by women. Emotional abuse and neglect of children also occurs, but can sometimes be hard to detect, and it may go unrecognized. Okay, so what are the effects of emotional abuse? Although emotional abuse may be less obvious than physical abuse, it can still have devastating effects on the mental health and well-being of adults and children. Research has shown that psychological or emotional abuse in adults can be linked to poor relationship satisfaction, symptoms of anxiety and depression, insomnia, low self-esteem, suicidal thoughts, increased physical health problems such as migraine, indigestion, stomach ulcers, chronic pain, and chronic disease. Emotional abuse of children can have serious effects on their development, and these effects can continue into adult life. Okay, so now that we examined what emotional abuse is, let's switch gears and now discuss why is it difficult to let go of the emotionally abusive partner. Survivors of abuse might need years to recover and finally be able to let go after escaping. For the survivors out there, here are some things you might discover after recovering from abuse. 1. The abuser love bombs the target person and convinces them that they are their dream lover, their soulmate, their perfect match. They concentrate on the target person so heavily that the target develops an unrealistically hedonistic attachment to the abuser. So when I say they concentrate on the abuser concentrates on the target person so heavily that the target develops an unrealistically hedonistic attachment to the abuser. What I'm trying to say is the victim is in pursuit of pleasure. The target person's brain is flooding them with dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, and oxytocin, which are all pleasure chemicals. It's like being high. So when I say the victim has a hedonistic attachment to the abuser, I'm referring to this fact that the victims also known as a target person, that their brain is flooding them with dopamine, serotonin, norepinephrine, and oxytocin. These, again, are all pleasure chemicals. They are seeking that pleasure. That is the hedonistic attachment. The target person thinks that this is the abuser's real personality. Okay, so 2, the abuse often starts slowly, so that the target person thinks that something is wrong, but can't figure out why they feel that way. The target person turns to the abuser to try to fix the relationship problem because they believe that their earlier experience of the abuser is the abuser's real persona. In fact, that persona is all contrived. The abuser starts to use twisted logic that isn't logic repeatedly, so that the target person begins to be unable to trust their own mind and their own perception of reality. The abuser begins to try to change the target person to divest them of their identity, to further weaken them emotionally. All of a sudden, the target person is being told that they dress wrong, they wear their hair wrong, they speak incorrectly, they are an embarrassment, etc. The identity becomes mangled. 4, the abuser isolates the target person, effectively removing their support system. This means that the target person is cut off from gaining other people's perspectives on life, creating a perfect opportunity for the abuser to control how the target person sees reality itself. 5, the abuser keeps the target person sleep deprived, food deprived, friendship deprived, affection deprived, and begins to convince the target person that things that aren't love are actually love. The abuser's twisted control tactics have the target person apologizing for the abuser's behavior. In that twisted space, this makes sense to the target person, and they think that if they just do better, the abuse will stop. Of course, this is completely untrue. Often, abusers use intense sexual experiences to control the target person. Abusers use sex as both a reward and a punishment. Normal expressions of sexual love are completely absent from the relationship, and often a dark, edgy sort of sexual expression takes its place. Okay, so what I just explained were things you might discover after recovering from the abuse. But when we finally escape the abusers, our minds are goo. For example, some victims have been reduced to hiding money in lipstick tubes and tampon applicators. AKA, they are exhausted, broken, unable to trust their own perceptions. We all often have PTSD. The abuser then becomes their former contrived self, apologizing, attempting to love bomb, showing actions that appear to be attempts to better themselves. For example, they say things like, I started therapy, or I'm getting treatment for my addiction, or I will give you space and show you that I respect you and you can take your time deciding if we can work it out. Sometimes we buy this crap and go back for more of the same, but only worse this time. This abuser made themselves the center of our lives. This abuser forced us to concentrate solely on them. They made sure we had nothing to depend on but them. And they used sex and love to control us, among other things. And sex is powerful. The desire for affection is powerful. We are now programmed to think the abuser is a necessary part of our lives. Also, if we do encounter romantic gestures from would-be suitors, the suitors do not love bomb us, as they are not abusers who use such tactics. Therefore, their administrations are not as intense, not as edgy, and may even seem boring to us, because our brains have been twisted by the abuse. That leaves us thinking about how exciting sex with the abuser had been. We will vacillate between finding good memories, and there will always be a few, and deeply resenting the abuser for what they did to us. We will sometimes still think that we were at fault for some of the things that happened, And we were. For example, had my face not been there, he couldn't have punched it. Yeah, sarcasm intended. Recovering from domestic violence is a very long process. It's not linear either. It's messy. It's raw. It's a matter of rebuilding identity, trust, confidence, and the ability to feel normal joy instead of an insane, chaotic imposter of joy that we were force-fed by our abuser. For the National Domestic Violence Hotline, please call 1-800-799-7233 or visit thehotline.org. Thank you for listening.